They were a power couple chasing their destiny.
She's a go-getter just like him.
They were just a beautifully happy couple.
But their life goes up in smoke after an unthinkable crime. Small town would be ripped apart.
Some workers had found the body.
She was shot 3 times. She was laying there, her eyes was open.
It devastated me.
At the heart of the crime is a slew of secrets and lies.
He had 2 girls in love with him.
She would do whatever she needed to do to ensure that relationship.
And the truth will reveal a love gone wrong.
What did you do?
She wanted to be loved. She loved him until she died.
April 27th, 2017. It's a quiet Thursday morning in Marianna, Florida, a town of just 7,000, 60 miles inland from Panama City.
I always ask people that come here, how did you find Marianna? You know, because it's so small.
What industry there is in Marianna is mostly packing and shipping produce from the farms in the local area.
It's 8 a.m. at a packing plant just north of town. 2 workers are arriving for the day's shift when one of them spots something in the field behind the warehouse.
He was pulling in, and he said, look like somebody been dumping trash out here or something.
They thought it was a trash bag, which is not uncommon. People throw everyday trash out on somebody else's property.
But as the men walk over to pick up the garbage bag,
Yo, hold up.
they make a horrifying discovery.
Upon closer look, they realized it wasn't trash. It was actually a body.
As she was laying there, her eyes was open.
The workers call 911.
Yes, it's an emergency.
And when deputies from the Jackson County Sheriff's Department arrive on the scene, they quickly realize they're dealing with a homicide.
We did determine that she had been shot multiple times.
There's no ID on the body. But when Captain Scott Edwards arrives on scene, he's horrified to realize that he already knows the victim's name.
I knew her mom and stepdad, but my wife knew the family better than I did.
From the scene, Captain Edwards calls his wife,
Cut his
Cherie,
legs off
who's also an
completely.
investigator
He was
with the
basically-
Jackson County Sheriff's Department.
This is Edwards.
I received a phone call from my husband, Captain Edwards. He advised me that there had been a homicide.
Yeah, we found the body.
It looks like it's Princella's daughter.
Scott, are you sure?
I'm sure it's
Keisha Smith.
25-year-old Keisha Smith and her family were known to almost everyone in the small town of Marianna, Florida.
Everybody pretty much knows everybody in Marianna.
Her mom and her dad were both hardworking people, both very friendly people, very well liked in the community.
They were nice people, church-going people. If you needed anything, they would help you out.
The same was true of Keisha, who was known for her welcoming smile and loving heart.
She embraced everybody. I don't think she saw any wrong in anybody. To know her was to definitely love her.
Keisha's greatest love was her 4-year-old son, Caden.
Keisha would do anything for Caden. She adored him and spoiled him rotten. Played with him every day. I'm gonna get you. And I got you.
Keisha was an awesome mom. Whatever he needed as a parent, that comfort and that support, that's what she gave Caden.
Caden's father wasn't in the picture.
It was very hard on her. I can tell that it bothered her.
She always wanted to have a father figure for Caden.
But the single mom did everything she could to create the best possible life for herself and her son.
She got into the medical field. She became a certified CNA, and she worked at the convalescent center.
The residents, they loved her. Keisha was big on helping people.
A busy work schedule and a little boy at home didn't keep Keisha from dreaming of one day finding Mr. Right.
She was looking for someone to love her. True, true love.
In October of 2016, when Keisha began dating 22-year-old Damian O'Neill, she thought she had found all that and more.
Keisha and Damian started dating, and it was a whirlwind romance.
The couple's relationship took off.
Coming!
Keisha was also attracted to the fact that Damian showed genuine affection toward her son.
The first time I saw him, she brought him to the house. He sat there on the chair.
Hey, there he is.
Daddy. I said, there's got to be something for that little boy to be calling you daddy. There. Oh, yes, ma'am. I love kids. I love kids.
So how was work today?
While Keisha's family felt things were moving too fast, they saw the effort Damian was making to be a good man to Keisha and Caden.
He did seem like he was invested in Caden. He did seem like he was invested in their relationship. I do remember him telling her, I'm gonna be able to provide, I'm gonna buy you this, buy you that.
He wanted to take care of Keisha and Caden. He wanted to be the man in the family.
By the spring of 2017, it looked like Keisha's dreams of true love were finally coming true.
He was going to buy Keisha her ring, and she was ecstatic.
But on the morning of April 27th, 2017, the future Damian and Keisha were planning is shattered when police believe they found Keisha Smith's body.
One of the investigators, Scott Edwards, recognized the victim immediately.
She had been shot multiple times, and whoever killed her attempted to hide her body with trash bags.
Captain Scott Edwards has the difficult task of alerting his wife, Cherie, who was also an investigator with the sheriff's department and close friend of Keisha's mother.
He knew that I was extremely close to Keisha and her family.
Send me a picture. I need to be sure.
I'll send one.
At the scene, Captain Edwards snaps a picture of the victim's face and texts it to his wife.
God. When he sent me the photograph, I immediately recognized it to be Keisha.
You had to come and take the bomb out, clear the whole neighborhood.
With the bomb...
Yeah.
You're right. It's her.
But who would want Keisha dead? For Detective Cherie Edwards, answering that question has become personal.
I knew that without a shadow of a doubt, whether I was the lead investigator or not, that I would make sure that everything possible was going to be done on this case for justice for her family.
In the spring of 2017, it looked as if single mother Keisha Smith had finally found true love with 22-year-old Damian O'Neill.
She was over the moon. She couldn't be happier.
Damian purchased an engagement ring for Keisha.
They was gonna get married.
But on April 27th, 2017, workers find her body dumped behind a building outside her hometown of Marianna, Florida.
She was dead and had been murdered.
Investigators from the Jackson County Sheriff's Department scour the scene for clues.
We did determine that Keisha had been shot multiple times, and there were some tire tracks in the area. Of course, the people in and out of the facility that morning was covering up other tracks leading in and out. So very little evidence, really.
Identifying who it was and knowing that she was shot, that's all they had initially.
With little evidence at the crime scene, detectives suspect the murder occurred elsewhere.
There was no signs of a struggle in the surrounding area. You just had a body that was put there.
The workers who called 911 offer no additional leads.
A typical murder investigation, you go to a crime scene, there's gonna be more clues than that. But in this one, there just wasn't. Anything that would indicate how she got there, what happened.
Detectives' next step is to figure out just how long ago Keisha had been left in the field.
Keisha was close to her family, and they had not reported her missing. Between that and the condition of Keisha's body, police believe she had only been dead for a few hours.
Soon after, Sheriff's investigator, Cherie Edwards, knocks on the door of Keisha's mother, Princella White.
Cherie has known Princella and the rest of the family for years.
My daughter grew up with her kids, you know, knowing her kids, and we just got to be really good friends.
We need to talk.
Investigator Edwards delivers the awful news that her friend's daughter is dead.
I'm so sorry.
I'll never forget the look on her face.
Straight
heart,
guy,
her heart.
Marcus
This
didn't
was
have any
devastating,
enemies.
absolutely
So why were
devastating
you two
for her.
separated?
We're just going through a wreck. I was just like, no, no, no.
It was her screaming and crying, me trying to calm her down, and me telling her, we'll get through this, whatever she needed, I would do.
Through her grief, Princella's thoughts turn to her 4-year-old grandson.
Oh, God. Where's Caden?
She didn't know where Keisha's son was at.
The fear spikes immediately. Where is the boy? Is he okay? Could this have been a violent kidnapping?
Where's my grandbaby?
Princella did not need another heartbreak, and I knew I had to find Caden.
All right, let's go.
Investigator Edwards and Princella race to Keisha's apartment in search of the child. And when they arrive, Princella's heart sinks a second time.
After police found Keisha, they sent a car to her apartment.
We get over to her apartment, and I see a state vehicle parked out there. Onlookers gathering around, and more police come.
All right, the victim has a 4-year-old son. Check with the neighbors, see if anyone knows where he is.
We kind of spanned out, went door to door in the apartment complex where Keisha lives.
While deputies canvass the building, Princella places a call to her grandson's daycare.
They say he was not at the daycare.
The news sends Princella into a panic, reaching out to friends and family, desperate to find her grandchild.
We couldn't find him. We were calling, we were making Facebook posts, we were putting pictures everywhere. We thought we'd lost him too.
After noticing the police car in front of Keisha's apartment, a woman emerges from a neighboring complex to see what's going on. With her is Caden.
Oh my God, thank you, baby. Hey, God, thank you, Lord, thank you. This lady stayed in the complex that would keep kids.
The child was there and he was okay.
I got him and I hugged him. And we went back up to Keisha's apartment and he says, Nana, where my mom at? I don't see her car. I don't see her car. I said, I don't know, baby. I don't know.
While Princella takes her grandson upstairs, investigator Edwards questions the woman who'd been caring for him.
She tells Detective Edwards that Keisha dropped Caden off at her apartment the night before.
She had not actually told that individual where she was going, but basically, that was the last time she was seen.
So what time was that?
That was around 10.
The neighbor said that Keisha was supposed to be back in about an hour or so, but she never returned.
I called her a bunch of times, but she didn't answer, so I just kept him overnight.
Was anybody with her?
No, and she drove her own car.
Okay, thank you. We'll be in touch.
Detective Edwards knows finding Keisha's vehicle may provide crucial evidence of finding her killer's identity.
We put a bolo out, we're looking for the car.
Back at the station, investigators hope Keisha's family can shed some light on where she may have been going that night. And they quickly learn some troubling information.
Keisha and Damien, they've been having some problems.
Weren't they engaged?
That's what Keisha thought.
The
Deaf
family
sergeant
informed
that
investigators
I've been
that
the victim
engagement was
of
off.
identity theft.
Something
found
is
out
just not
that
right
she
about
was
this
seeing
package.
someone
He thinks
else.
it definitely has
The girl's
something
name
to
was
do
Rachel
with this
Barnes.
whole debt.
According to Princella, Damien had actually proposed to her instead of Keisha.
Keisha was livid when she found out.
Could Damien's change of heart have had something to do with Keisha's murder?
Keisha was getting into it with this girl that was all on social media.
They were kind of feuding on text.
Now detectives must wonder, has Rachel and Keisha's feud taken a deadly turn?
We thought he was going to buy her ring. He'd actually went and bought her a ring. She thought she's finally going to get him. But he gave that ring to the other girl, and it devastated Keisha. And Keisha confronted her about it via text message. So we looked into that. Could she be responsible? Could she have helped him? Did he enlist help? So those are things we had to take into consideration.
Hours after Keisha Smith was found murdered in the quiet rural town of Marianna, Florida, news of her death has traveled fast.
All I could think of is, why would somebody do something like that? And then just leave her out there like that. That's horrible.
I couldn't even grasp who could have did this because of just her loving spirit. I just wanted to know why.
Detectives are beginning to suspect a love triangle may have led to the crime.
Keisha and her boyfriend, Damien, had recently split after Keisha found out that Damien was also seeing a girl named Rachel and had apparently proposed to her.
It turns out both women was feuding via text and social media.
Hoping to learn more, detectives turn to the object of the rivalry, 22-year-old Damien O'Neill.
Once we learned that's who the boyfriend was, of course, he was one we needed to speak with.
He was aware they were looking for him, and so he came right in and cooperated.
Thanks for coming in to talk with us.
Sure. It's just crazy, you know?
He had just found out when the family did.
We understand you and Keisha were getting pretty serious.
Yeah, but things sort of got complicated.
He did not know he was in a relationship at some point with Keisha.
What happened?
Well, I started getting serious with someone else. We're getting married, actually.
Keisha believed you were going to marry her.
Keisha thought he was going to propose to her, and then he turned around and ended up giving the ring to some other girl.
She must have taken that pretty hard.
Yeah, she was mad. And she started getting into it with Rachel.
It was the typical go between two girls fighting over a guy.
Did Rachel ever threaten Keisha?
Nah, never anything like that.
He said she flaunted the fact that, yeah, I'm going to be his wife, and you're not.
So you don't think Rachel had anything to do with this?
She couldn't have. She was with me.
His statement was that he was with Rachel in Panama City.
Panama City is a little over an hour from where Keisha's body was found.
She was with you the whole night?
Yeah.
And you were in Panama City the entire time?
Yes, with my brother Sean.
He had some brothers that lived in Bay County, and it was his brother's house that he was at.
While it's too early to know if Damien is telling the truth, detectives have nothing to hold him on.
There is no evidence to point in his direction.
We let him go, and we just continued to work the case.
Next, detectives bring in Damien's fiancée,
It was something that I'll always
21-year-old
remember the rest of my
Rachel
life.
Barnes.
Haunting words.
The girlfriend obviously was someone we were looking at. I mean, everybody, was still considered a person of interest until we could get it down to the wire as to who we thought the person was.
Questioned by detectives, Rachel doesn't deny knowing Keisha.
They were running the same circle.
But it all changed when Keisha found out Rachel was seeing Damien behind her back.
She told us, in case she confronted her about it, via text message. They had it out. She never denied her disagreement with Keisha over Damien.
However, Rachel's account of their disagreement tracks pretty closely with what Damien had already told the detectives.
Rachel also offers up the same alibi as Damien.
Rachel swore to investigators she and Damien had been in Panama City all night on the 26th into the 27th.
She said she would never wish that on anybody.
At this point, detectives aren't convinced Rachel's conscience is clear.
She might have had a motive because here's Damien's old girlfriend, Keisha Smith, and he were still having a relationship.
However, when detectives follow up with Damien's brother Sean, he confirms the couple's alibi.
With the alibi verbally confirmed, that obviously puts detectives at an impasse.
Early the following morning, the investigation gains momentum when the Jackson County Sheriff's Department locates Keisha's missing car in a park.
They immediately calls us. We get the vehicle towed in, and we start doing in search of the vehicle.
While CSI sweep the vehicle, detectives also receive Keisha's autopsy report and make a shocking revelation.
Keisha Smith was 8 weeks pregnant.
Detectives investigating the murder of 25-year-old Keisha Smith have just learned that she was 2 months pregnant when she was killed.
This is a tragic discovery, and it makes the detectives wonder if this is further proof that the love triangle between Damien, Rachel, and Keisha had boiled over.
It's hard to believe this would be a reason to murder someone, but it could be the result of a jealous rage.
Detectives also learn what kind of murder weapon they need to find.
During the autopsy, the medical examiner recovers 3 .38 caliber bullets from Keisha's body,
which was valuable evidence, obviously, to be compared if we ever found the firearm.
A search of Keisha's car, which Mariana police found abandoned in a park,
cut his legs off completely.
Proves less
He was
promising.
We did not find anything in the vehicle of evidentiary value.
With no leads stemming from Keisha's car, detectives hope to learn more about her pregnancy from her friend, Zaisha.
Sometimes friends know things that parents don't know. And this case was personal for detectives. So they decided to see if Keisha's friends knew about the pregnancy.
Did you know?
I found out about a month ago, maybe a little more. She texted me and told me she hadn't been feeling too good and that she was late.
Zaisha had urged her friend to take a pregnancy test.
It was positive. She was pregnant. So I asked her how she felt about it. She said, I don't know, right now I'm kind of freaking out. My emotions are everywhere. But I'm still excited.
Zaisha tells detectives that she shared her friend's excitement.
She always said she wanted another one. She already had a boy. She wanted a little girl. I was hoping maybe she got her girl this time.
To investigators, it seems more than a coincidence that a month after learning she was pregnant, Keisha Smith was dead.
Do you know who the father was?
It was Damien. Or at least that's what Keisha told me.
She was pretty adamant that it was, in fact, his baby.
That's why she was so excited. She thought it was some kind of sign.
I don't think she got intentionally pregnant, but when she did get pregnant, she thought the baby was gonna fix everything. She felt she could, win him back.
Perhaps Damien's fiancée, Rachel Barnes, felt the same way and feared the pregnancy would pull Damien away.
From Rachel's perspective, she and Damien are getting serious. They are looking to build a new life together in Panama City. They're making plans to get married. Maybe Rachel saw this as a threat.
Could she be responsible? Certainly, females are not an exception to being killers.
And soon a new discovery shines a more suspicious light on Rachel Barnes.
In a bizarre stroke of luck, in early May, police in Panama City found Rachel's car on the side of the road.
Florida tag, George India Union, Frank 01.
They ran the tag place and it came back to her.
Rachel Barnes. You want to check it out?
Yep.
And it was sort of abandoned. So that kind of made them suspicious.
What officers find inside the car raises more red flags
They
for
end up
Mariana
having a
detectives.
whirlwind, a fun.
It looked like there were efforts made to clean the car with bleach or some type of cleaner.
It definitely had the appearance of an attempt to conceal a crime.
Detectives investigating Keisha Smith's murder are beginning to suspect that 21-year-old Rachel Barnes is the one who pulled the trigger.
Rachel was engaged to Keisha's ex, Damian O'Neill.
There had been some issues between the two women, arguing over text messages and social media.
Detectives wonder if news that Keisha was pregnant with Damian's child pushed Rachel over the edge.
Well, they found Rachel's car. There was some items in it that kind of made them suspicious.
It was on the side of the road, the back seat covered in bleach, and only 6 days after Keisha's murder, detectives are very suspicious.
Hoping to put Rachel and her car in Mariana on the night of the murder, detectives pull her phone records.
There was nothing in the records to indicate that Rachel left Panama City the night of the murder.
However, it doesn't prove her innocence just yet.
She could have turned her phone off or left it behind.
Still hoping to place Rachel near the scene of the murder, detectives begin canvassing local businesses.
We're a small area, so we have a few hot spots that most people go to.
Detectives focus their efforts on the strip of gas stations near the interstate.
Several businesses that have video camera, and it's a high traffic area.
Reviewing the surveillance footage from one of the gas stations on the night of April 26th, it looks like they've hit the jackpot.
They did see Rachel's car.
It pulls into the gas station around 10 p.m. on the night of the murder, right around the time Keisha left her apartment.
Just as detectives believe they have the proof they need, the investigation takes an unexpected turn.
They looked at the video from the store and saw Damian O'Neill walking in there.
That's damning evidence.
It means that Damian O'Neill's not telling the truth, and it means that he could have done this murder.
With Damian's alibi in tatters, detectives attempt to bring him in, but are unable to locate him.
He started to evade us and laid low with different family members in Bay County to avoid us.
However, detectives do find Rachel
clear the whole neighborhood.
in a local hospital.
Rachel had a medical issue right after the first time they talked to her.
After consulting a doctor, detectives are allowed to bring Rachel in for a second interview.
They confronted her that, you're not telling us the truth. He obviously wasn't with you all night in Panama City.
You knew that he was in Mariana the night that Keisha was murdered, didn't you?
Yes.
She said that she lied in the first statement because she didn't know what he had gotten her involved in.
Look, I didn't know he was going to kill her.
He told her to just say I was with you all night without really explaining where he was.
He just borrowed my car. Told me he was going to Mariana to take care of some business.
What time did he leave?
9 o'clock, maybe a little before.
Since it's an hour's drive from Panama City, Rachel's account appears to line up with the gas station video showing Damian in Mariana at 10 p.m.
When I found out she was dead, I was afraid I'd be next if I tell you the truth.
She was terrified because she knew what kind of person Damian was.
When detectives ask about Keisha's pregnancy, Rachel's response isn't what they were expecting.
Did you know that Keisha was pregnant?
Oh my God. Damian, what did you do?
She denied knowing that Keisha was pregnant with Damian's child.
You have to keep in mind, too, is she doing this because she fears we're going to find out later that she was involved?
On May 9th, with proof Damian lied about his alibi, detectives decide to try their luck by interviewing the one who vouched for him, his brother, Sean.
They figured they could press him and maybe get him to give up his brother.
Man, I already told you. Damien was with me.
We know he was here. We know about the baby. Your brother killed a pregnant woman. You want to go down for that?
He started worrying about himself and his own charges. Eventually, he said that Damien might have done something bad.
Okay. I'll tell y'all what I know.
Damien's brother goes on to explain what happened on April 26th.
He was at my place. He took his girl's car. Came back a few hours later. He came into my bedroom.
I need you to get rid of this.
What is this?
Damien had given him the gun. Damien had disclosed that Keisha was pregnant. I think that he knew what Damien had done.
What did you do?
Just get rid of it.
Damien,
Okay?
what did you do? Just get rid of it.
Straight guy, a hard worker.
Marcus didn't have any enemies.
I didn't know what to do.
So why were you two separated?
He's my brother.
We were just going through a...
So I hid the gun.
Where's the gun?
You gotta put something on the table for me first.
His whole concern was wanting to have immunity if he showed them where the gun was.
That set this investigation in motion from having circumstantial evidence to having something we could actually work with.
Cherie and I are real good friends. And she called me, she said, we got a lead. She said, we got boots on the ground. We're going to follow this lead.
Based on Damien's brother's statement, police are able to recover the gun from a sewer drain in Panama City.
The gun dried up in a lot of bags.
It was a revolver, a silver-handled revolver at .38 with a white grip.
That's the same caliber as the bullets recovered during Keisha's autopsy.
While investigators wait for results, they shift their focus to finding their suspected shooter.
Now there is a full-on manhunt for Damien O'Neill.
The murder rate in Marianna, Florida is typically below the national average, often with 0 homicides annually. However, in 2017, the rate was 13.8 per 100,000, nearly 3 times the national average. The unusually high number can be attributed to Marianna's thin population of just 7,239 and only 1 homicide occurring that year. On May 10, 2017, detectives with the Jackson County, Florida Sheriff's Department believe they're finally on the verge of solving the murder of 25-year-old single mom, Keisha Smith.
Detectives suspect that Keisha's ex-boyfriend, Damien O'Neill, murdered Keisha in hopes of hiding the pregnancy from his fiancée.
Detectives now have what they suspect is the murder weapon, but they still need to find Damien.
We were finally advised that Damien was at a house in Bay County.
Before the sun rises on the morning of May 11th, detectives and deputies surround the house.
Sheriff's Department, open up!
Detectives find Damien inside.
Out of the way!
He was sitting there playing a video game.
On the ground now!
Damien O'Neill is taken into custody without incident. Back at the station, investigators give him a chance to come clean.
We read him his rights. I said, Damien, do you want to talk? He said no.
You got nothing to say? I said, because I already gave my statement and everything.
Detectives try tipping their hand to persuade Damien.
I'm just going to show you something. There's a gun wrapped up in the bag. There's the gun out with the 5-spent shell casing. That's the bags and stuff that it's coming out of. Okay? But since you don't want to make no statement, Detective Edwards here has got some news for you.
It's a bittersweet moment for Cherie Edwards. when she formally arrests
Sergeant,
Damien.
that I've been the victim of identity theft.
Something is just not right about this package. He thinks it definitely has something to do with this whole debt thing.
It was very personal for me. That was my last piece of justice for Keisha.
Once Damien is placed in a cell, Cherie Edwards and her husband race to give Keisha's mother the news.
It was grateful they personally came to the house and said, hey, we got him. We got him.
On May 15th, Damien O'Neill is indicted for the second-degree murder of Keisha Smith.
However, despite the fact that Keisha was carrying Damien's unborn child, he only faces a single murder charge.
The length of time she had been pregnant did not meet the criteria by statute to pursue the unborn child's death.
When the results from the ballistics test come in, investigators are now confident they can secure a conviction.
And after ballistics compared the bullets from Keisha's body to that weapon, it was the murder weapon.
The case against Damien is so strong that on May 22nd, he decides to make a full confession.
Things just got out of hand, didn't they, Damon? Is that a yes? Can you say it?
Yes, sir.
Damien admits to meeting Keisha on the night of April 26th in an empty park on the outskirts of town.
She got in his car and they drove.
Where was y'all go? Was you out there in that field behind the old barn?
But Damien says their talk started to get heated when he revealed that things between them were over for good.
Okay. What were y'all arguing about?
Damien, I love you.
Keisha, it's over.
What Damien tells detectives next is completely unexpected.
You're not leaving me, Damien. I won't let you.
Keisha, stop.
So you put a knife to my throat. And then what did you do?
Keisha?
What happened after you shot her? You just put her out there on the grass?
In light of his full confession, Damien elects to plead guilty to second-degree murder and avoid a jury trial.
I was relieved to hear that he was going to plead for Priscilla's sake.
It gave them closure without having to sit through a trial.
However, police and prosecutors believe that Damien's claim of self-defense was meant to cover his true motive.
I think they met and they got arguing over this child.
I told you to get rid of it.
Why? Don't you feel anything for the baby? For me?
She thought that it was gonna bring them together.
Can't you see? You're ruining everything?
No!
He just was not going to let her have that baby. And he just
take a look at what I sent you.
It was something that I'll always
frustrating for the
remember
family
most of
because
my life.
they just want to know
Haunting
why
words.
couldn't you resolve it some other way, and he would never say.
During victim impact statements at the sentencing hearing, Keisha's mother gets her chance to tell Damien exactly what she thinks of him.
I told him he's just the son of Satan.
She said, we want him to sit and think of what he did to our little girl and unborn grandchild for the rest of his life.
If I had my choice, I'd paint her picture on every wall, every 4 walls. Make sure he see him every day.
The judge sentences Damien to life in prison.
When they revealed that the sentence was live, it was like a weight had been lifted off of us.
It won't take back what happened, but at least he's not going free.
But no prison term will ever make up for what Damien took from the world.
I want people to remember Keisha's life, how she lived, her smile.
Even now, I can close my eyes and I can just see her face and that sweet, genuine smile.
I miss her every day. It's not a day, not a second, not a minute, not an hour that goes by that I don't think about her. All she wanted was someone to love her back.
Part 1. The Dry Wind of the High Desert. Chapter 1. The Rusting of the Gears. The morning of May 13, 2013, did not arrive with a clean dawn. It crawled over the serrated ridges of the Virginia Range in a low, yellow smear, carrying the smell of sagebrush, alkaline dust, and the faint, chemical temps of burning petroleum from the distant highway. In this corner of Nevada, where the high desert spills into deep canyons of gravel and dry scrub, the sky always felt too vast. A cold vault of blue that made the small settlements clinging to the interstate look like scattered teeth. To the people who lived in the unincorporated tracts between Reno and the dusty basin of Fernley, the land was less a scenic vista and more an obstacle to be endured. It was a landscape of gravel pits, shipping depots, long-haul truck stops, and the neon-lit roofs of legal brothels sitting back from the access roads behind chain-link fences. It was a place where people came to disappear, or to work jobs that began before the sun had cleared the peaks, or simply because the rent in the city had chased them out into the sage. Marcia Longfellow was not a woman given to... She was 56 years old, with hands toughened by 30 years of packing dry goods, and a face that had taken on the dry, creased texture of the hills. For the past 5 years, her morning routine had been as rigid as the shift whistle at the gypsum plant. At 6:15 a.m., she would start her old Buick, let the lifters clatter until the oil warmed, and drive the 4 miles from her double-wide trailer to the small, independent fuel station just off Interstate 80 at the Mustang exit. The station was a low, cinder-block box with 2 faded red pumps and a gravel lot that had never been paved. It served the local diesel haulers, the construction workers heading toward the industrial parks, and the occasional lost tourists looking for the legendary Mustang Ranch down the dirt road. Marcia's friend, Ela Vance, was always there before her. He was 51, with a bad leg from an old tractor accident and a crooked, lopsided grin that made him look like a caricature of an old-time sailor what his sister Maeve called his Popeye look. Eli was the sort of man who functioned as the unspoken ballast of the community. He was the one who didn't complain about the graveyard shift, the one who would patch a tire for a stranded traveler on credit, and the one who worked 3 different jobs just to keep his elderly mother in her nursing home in Fallon. He delivered newspapers in the small hours, swept the floors at the mattress factory in Reno during the day, and ran the register at the Mustang station when the sun went down. But on this morning, the station was dark. Marcia pulled her Buick onto the gravel, the tires crunching loudly in the quiet air. The closed sign was still turned toward the glass, but Eli's rusty green Ford pickup was nowhere to be seen. The padlocks on the gas pumps were still in place, their brass faces dull with dust. Eli, she muttered, swinging her legs out of the car. The morning air was cold enough to make her breath bloom in front of her. Eli, you old fool, did you sleep through the alarm? She walked to the glass door, cupping her hands around her eyes to peer inside. The small interior was silent. The coffee pot was cold, the glass jars of beef jerky sitting on the counter like specimens in a quiet museum. She turned around, her boots clicking on the gravel. That was when she saw the papers. The morning delivery of the Reno Gazette-Chanel had not been bundled and placed by the door. Instead, individual sheets of newsprint were scattered across the gravel lot, caught in the dry sagebrush at the edge of the wash, fluttering like broken wings against the wire fence. Some had drifted 50 yards down the shoulder of the access road, their pages soiled by grease and red dirt. Marcia walked toward the fence, intending to gather them before they blew onto the highway. She picked up a sports section, then an editorial page, her eyes scanning the scrub. Just past the line of fence posts, where the ground sloped down into a shallow, gravelly ditch, she saw what looked like a pile of discarded bedding. It was a gray, wool blend blanket, the kind sold at army surplus stores, bunched up against a clump of rabbit. "Eli," she called out again, her voice suddenly sounding thin and fragile against the roar of a semi-truck passing on the interstate above. She scrambled down the bank, her sneakers sliding on the loose shale. As she reached the bottom, she realized the blanket wasn't just lying on the ground. It was draped over something solid, something large and irregular. She reached out and pulled the corner of the wool back. The skin of Eli John Vance's leg was the color of skimmed milk in the early light. He was lying on his side, his body curled slightly toward the bank. His work trousers had been pulled down past his knees, bunching around his ankles, and his flannel shirt was dragged up around his armpits, leaving his torso bare to the cold desert wind. His eyes were open, staring at the gray dirt of the ditch with a flat, milky gaze that had no recognition in it. Marcia did not scream. The air seemed to leave her lungs all at once, as if she had been struck in the solar plexus by a heavy timber. She took 3 slow, mechanical steps backward, her boots sinking into the sand, until her back hit the wooden fence post. Above her, the papers continued to flutter in the wind, a dry, rhythmic sound, like distant applause. Chapter 2: The Logic of the Surface. By 7:45 a.m., the Mustang exit was no longer a quiet transition point between the highway and the high desert. It was an island of flashing blue and red lights. Detective Silas Thorne of the Washoe County Sheriff's Office sat in his unmarked Crown Victoria, watching the dust settle behind an arriving crime scene van. Silas was fit, with gray-streaked hair cut short, enough to reveal the white scars on his scalp from his days as an undercover narcotics officer in the late 90s. He was a quiet man, slow in his movements but possessed of an aggressive, almost obsessive attention to detail that made his colleagues both respect and avoid him. He had spent his early career in the dark, living in cheap motels under 3 different names, buying methamphetamine from bikers and tracking the quiet, internal migrations of the West's criminal underworld. He knew how people talked when they thought no one was listening. More importantly, he knew how they looked when they were trying to lie with their butt. He opened the car door and stepped out into the wind, pulling his wool coat tight around his chest. He walked toward the yellow crime scene tape that had been strung from the gas station sign to a pair of old wooden posts. "Silas," a voice called. It was Deputy Miller, a young man whose uniform still looked too stiff and blue for the country. He was holding a clipboard, his face slightly pale under his wide-brimmed hat. "What do we have, Miller?" Silas asked, his voice low and gravelly. "Bodies down in the ditch, just off the access road," Miller said, pointing with his pen. "Identified by a co-worker, Marsha. Name is Eli John Vance. Local guy. Worked the night shift here. His sister's on her way. Apparently someone called her from the station before we could get the scene secure." Silas nodded, stepping over the tape. He walked down the gravel slope, his boots finding the stable stones automatically. The medical examiner's investigator, a thin man named Arias, was already kneeling by the body, his black leather bag open on the dirt. "Don't touch the blanket yet," Silas said. "Already done." Silas had to check the vitals, though it was pretty obvious, Arias said, looking up. His glasses were sliding down his nose. "He's been dead since sometime before midnight. Rigors well established. No defensive wounds on the hands. No signs of a struggle in the immediate dirt." Silas knelt beside Arias, his knees popping in the quiet. He looked at Eli's face. The lopsided grin was gone, replaced by the slackness of sudden death. On the left side of his temple, just below the hairline, were 3 small, neat holes, capped with crusts of dark maroon blood. "Small caliber," Silas murmured. "Looks like it," Arias agreed. "Very little exit trauma. Probably died where he fell, or was dumped here immediately after. The blood pooling in his back suggests he was on his side for some time." "Why are his pants down?" Silas asked, his eyes moving down the body. "No immediate signs of sexual assault," Arias said, pulling the trousers slightly to reveal the pale skin underneath. "No tearing of the tissue that I can see without an autopsy. It's odd. The shirt's pulled up over his chest, like he was dragged by his clothes. Or like someone wanted him found this way," Silas said. He stood up, looking back toward the gas station. "If he was killed here, where's his truck?" Marsha said he always drove his green Ford. "Not here," Miller called down from the road. We ran the plate. Green 1998 Ford F150. We've got patrol looking for it along the I-80 corridor. Silas walked up the bank, his mind already clicking through the possibilities. A robbery gone wrong. The cash register at the station was intact, according to the deputy who had checked the door. The padlocks were secure. If Eli had been killed during a robbery, why did it happen out here by the highway instead of inside the building? And why leave his wallet? Silas had seen Eli's wallet sticking out of his back pocket, the leather dark with years of sweat, still containing $43 in cash in his driver's license. Detective Thorne. Silas turned. A woman had appeared at the edge of the yellow tape. She was wearing a faded denim jacket over a floral house dress, her gray hair pulled back in a messy bun. She was leaning against a rusty pickup truck, her face twisted in a mixture of anger and grief that Silas had seen too many times before. It was Mavie Vance, Eli's older sister. Silas walked toward her, his face softening into the practiced, neutral mask of the investigator. "I'm Detective Thorne." Maeve didn't look at him. She looked past his shoulder, toward the yellow tape and the blue blanket that was now being lifted by the coroner's assistant. "It was Frank," she said. Her voice was flat, hard, and devoid of tears. "He finally did it." Silas took out his notebook. Frank Vance. "Our brother," Maeve said, her eyes finally snapping to Silas's face. "They've been trying to kill each other for 20 years. Frank's a mean, bitter bastard. He tried to run Eli over with his car 2 weeks ago right in our mother's driveway. Eli wouldn't press charges because he didn't want Mom to see it in the papers. But Frank didn't stop. He's been saying for years that he'd put Eli in the ground." "Where is Frank now?" Silas asked. "He's a driver," Maeve said, spitting the words out like gravel. "Over-the-road trucker. Drives for one of those outfits out of Sparks. He's got a white Freightliner, probably halfway to Salt Lake by now," laughing his head off. Silas wrote the name down. Frank Vance, white Freightliner. "We'll find him, Mav," Silas said gently. "I promise you we will." But as he walked back to his car, Silas felt a cold knot in his stomach. In his experience, family feuds that lasted 20 years rarely ended with 3 neat holes in the temple and a body dumped in a ditch with its pants down. It was too clean, yet too strange. It lacked the messy, drunken rage of domestic violence. This felt like something else, something cold, deliberate, and entirely empty of human feeling. Part 2. The Smoke over Fernley. Chapter 3. The House on the Ridge. 22 miles east of the Mustang exit, the town of Fernley sat in a wide, dry basin where the Carson River once ran into the sand. It was a town of subdivisions that had sprung up during the housing boom of the early 2000s, surrounded by old alfalfa fields and dairy farms that had long since gone dry. At 5:32 a.m. that same morning, the dispatcher at the Lyon County Sheriff's Department received a 911 call from a resident on Cedar Creek Drive, a quiet loop of modest ranch homes on the eastern edge of town. "There's smoke coming from the Pape place," the caller said, her voice shaking slightly. "The garage is on fire. It looks like the truck inside is burning." By the time the volunteer fire department arrived, the garage of 1402 Cedar Creek Drive was fully engulfed. The black smoke rose in a straight column into the cold morning air, visible from the interstate 3 miles away. The firemen worked quickly, their hoses hissing against the burning drywall, and within 40 minutes they had knocked the flames down to a smoldering ruin of black timber and melted plastic. Inside the garage, the charred remains of a pickup truck sat on its rims. The tires had melted into pools of black tar on the concrete, and the engine block was white with ash. Detective Matthew Marty Dews of the Lyon County Sheriff's Office arrived at the scene just as the sun was clearing the horizon. Marty was 41, a former military policeman with a square jaw and a quiet, methodical way of speaking. He had lived in Lyon County his entire life and knew almost everyone on the street. He walked up the driveway, stepping over the wet fire hoses. The fire marshal, a beefy man named Vance, was standing by the entrance of the charred garage, his turnouts covered in soot. "Morning," Marty Vance said, wiping his face with a sleeve. "We got the fire out, but we've got some weird things here." "How so?" Marty asked, looking at the melted truck. "Well, for one, this isn't the Pape's truck," Vance said. "Robert Pape is 84 years old. He drives a pristine 2004 silver Chevy Silverado. This truck in the garage. It's an old green Ford F150. The plates are half melted, But we ran the VENG on the frame. It belongs to a guy named Ely John Vance out of Reno. Marty frowned. Vance never heard of him. Where are Robert and Dorothy? That's the other thing, Vance said, pointing toward the main house. The fire didn't reach the living quarters. Just smoke damage. But the house is locked up tight. We knocked. We yelled. We did a quick sweep through the front door when we first arrived to make sure no one was sleeping inside. But the smoke was too thick. The firemen said they didn't see anyone in the bedrooms. Marty felt a cold prickle of unease. He walked to the front door of the house. The wood was warm to the touch, and the small decorative glass pane in the center was black with soot from the inside. He turned the handle. It was locked. "Let's get inside," Marty said to the deputy standing nearby. "Get the door open." The deputy used a halogen bar, the wood splintering with a loud crack as the latch gave way. A wave of hot, chemical-smelling smoke drifted out into the morning air. Marty pulled his shirt over his nose and stepped inside, his flashlight beam cutting through the gray haze. The living room was quiet. The furniture was covered in a thin layer of black soot, but everything was in its place. On the mantelpiece, a framed photograph of Robert and Dorothy Pape on their 50th wedding anniversary showed them smiling, their arms wrapped around each other's shoulders. Marty walked down the hallway toward the master bedroom. The air was clearer here, but the smell of smoke was still thick. He pushed the bedroom door open. The bed had been stripped. The mattress was bare, the sheets and blankets gone. On the carpet near the foot of the bed, Marty saw a strange, glistening trail. It looked like someone had taken a bottle of liquid soap or shampoo and squeezed it in long, looping squiggles across the floor, as if trying to paint a picture with blue gel. "What the hell is that?" the deputy muttered behind him. Marty didn't answer. He walked toward the walk-in closet at the back of the room. The door was half. Inside, the closet was dark, but his flashlight beam caught something on the floor. Most of the clothes were still hanging on their racks, but a massive pile of coats, trousers, and dresses had been pulled down and heaped in the center of the small space. Marty stepped into the closet, his boots crunching on something dry. He reached down and pulled back a heavy wool winter coat. Underneath the coat was a human foot, clad in a thick, white athletic sock. Marty pulled back more clothes. Robert Pape was lying on his back, his head tilted to one side. His silver hair was matted with blood. Beside him, her arm draped over his chest in a final, terrible embrace, was his wife, Dorothy. She was 82, her small frame covered in a blue nightgown that was dark with blood at the shoulder. "Get the coroner," Marty said, his voice dropping to a whisper, "and call Washoe County. Tell them we've got a double homicide here, and it's connected to their truck." Chapter 4. The Merging of the Lines. By noon, the Cedar Creek house had become the center of a multi-jurisdictional investigation. Silas Thorne stood in the driveway, watching the technicians in white suits carry bags of evidence out of the house. He had driven from the Mustang exit as soon as the call came through. The green Ford truck in the Pape's garage was indeed Ely John Vance. "So we have 3 dead, Silas said, standing beside Marty Dews under the shade of an old elm tree. Ely Vance, at the Mustang exit, shot 3 times with a point, and Robert and Dorothy Papier, both shot with a point. Robert twice in the chest, once in the head, Dorothy once in the temple. "And the truck swap," Marty said, rubbing his temple. "The killer takes the Pape's silver Chevy from their driveway, drives it to the Mustang exit, kills Ely Vance, leaves the Chevy there, and takes Eli's green Ford back here to Fernley." "Why?" Silas asked, his eyes scanning the quiet street. "Why swap the trucks? If you want to hide your tracks, you don't drive a stolen truck back to the scene of the first murders." "Maybe he didn't swap them immediately," Marty suggested. "The medical examiner says the Papes have been dead for at least 2 days. Maybe 3. Look at the kitchen." Silas had already seen it. The kitchen of the Pape home was one of the most disturbing aspects of the scene. On the counter sat a baking sheet containing a full pound of freshly cooked bacon, now cold and white with congealed grease. In the trash was a half-eaten pizza box from a local delivery place, dated 2 nights ago. "The killer didn't just murder them and run," Silas said, his voice low. "He stayed here. He lived in the house with their bodies in the closet. He cooked bacon. He ordered a pizza. He was using their home like a motel. And then," Marty continued, "for some reason, this morning, he decides to set the truck in the garage on fire, to destroy evidence, or to burn the house down and cover the whole thing up." "But the fire didn't take," Silas said. It just smoldered in the garage. So he panics. He runs out of the house. He needs a new car. He goes on foot. Or he's still in the area, Marty said, his hand moving to his service weapon. A sudden shout from the street broke their concentration. A resident from 2 doors down, a man in a grease-stained t-shirt, was running toward them, waving his arms. "Hey, you need to get over to Angie's house," the man screamed. "Angie Duff. She didn't show up for her shift at the senior center this morning. We went to check on her, and her back door is smashed in. There's glass everywhere." Silas and Marty didn't wait. They ran down the asphalt of Cedar Creek Drive, their guns drawn, their radio units crackling with sudden, frantic traffic. Part 3. The Red House. Chapter 5. The Fight on the Carpet. Angie Duff's house was a neat, yellow-painted cottage, with a well-kept garden of roses and desert lilies. It sat on a corner lot, surrounded by a low wooden fence. Silas Thorne was the first to reach the back gate. He stepped through, his boots crunching on the shattered fragments of a glass sliding door that led into the kitchen. The door had been completely destroyed, the frame bent outward as if by a heavy blow. "Sheriff's office," Silas yelled, his voice echoing in the quiet house. "Anyone inside?" There was no answer, only the quiet hum of a refrigerator and the smell of copper, the unmistakable, heavy scent of fresh blood. Silas stepped through the broken door, his gun raised. Marty was right behind him, covering his left flank. The kitchen was a shambles. A wooden table had been overturned, its legs pointing toward the ceiling like a dead animal. On the floor, a broken ceramic sugar bowl had spilled its contents into a dark, widening pool of red. Silas moved slowly into the living room. The scene here was not a quiet murder, it was a combat zone. The sofa had been pushed 3 feet from its position against the wall, the fabric torn and stained with dark smears. The coffee table was splintered into 3 pieces. On the walls, long, thin sprays of blood reached up toward the ceiling, as if painted by a frantic hand. Angie Duff was sick. She was a woman who had spent her life working as a nurse, and she was not someone who went quietly into the dark. Her body was lying near the hallway door, her hands still clenched into fists. She had been shot twice in the chest, but her face was bruised and her knuckles were raw, split to the bone from where she had struck her attacker. Beside her, slumped against the hallway wall, was Lester Lever, Angie's longtime companion, who had come over to help her with the garden that morning. Lester had been shot 3 times in the torso, but his death had not been clean. A deep, ragged knife wound ran across his collarbone, the skin torn as if by a dull blade. 5, Marty whispered, his voice trembling slightly. "Jesus, Silas. That's 5 people." "He's still here," Silas said, his eyes wild as he looked at the blood on the hallway floor. It was still bright red, still liquid. "This just happened. Within the last hour. Look at the blood, it hasn't even begun to dry." "The SWAT team is 10 minutes out," Marty said, his radio crackling as he spoke to dispatch. "We need to seal the perimeter. Every deputy we have. Block the roads. Don't let anyone out of this subdivision." Silas walked to the window, looking out at the sagebrush hills that rose immediately behind the Cedar Creek development. The land stretched 4 miles, a wilderness of gravel and dry washes, where a man could walk for days without seeing a road. "He's on foot," Silas said. "He left his weapons here." "No, he's probably got them on him. He's desperate. He's running out of time, and he knows it." Chapter 6. The Space Under the Floorboards. At 1:15 p.m., the wind picked up, driving dust storms across the empty lots of Fernley. The streets were deserted, the residents locked inside their homes under orders from the sheriff's department. Helicopter blades wind overhead, their searchlights cutting through the dust, while SWAT officers in green tactical gear moved through the yards with rifles raised. Silas Thorne stood in the driveway of a home 2 doors down from Angie Duff's yellow cottage. The homeowner, an elderly veteran named Curtis, was standing by his garage, a double-barreled shotgun held tight against his shoulder. "I heard him," Curtis said, pointing toward the crawlspace vent at the base of his home. "About 20 minutes ago, a scraping sound, like someone was dragging a heavy sack under the floorboards." Silas knelt by the vent. The wooden cover had been pried off, leaving a dark, rectangular opening that smelled of dry dirt and "Marta," Silas called. "Get the SWAT guys over here. We've got a hot lead." Within 3 minutes, 4 tactical officers had surrounded the crawlspace. One of them, a thick-shouldered man named Von lay on his stomach and shone a high-intensity light into the darkness under the house. Clear, Vance called out after a long moment, but we've got some items here. He reached into the hole, his gloved hand pulling out a black canvas bag. Inside was a collection of silver jewelry, 3 gold watches, and a thick bundle of $100 bills wrapped in a rubber band property that had belonged to Robert and Dorothy Pat. He was here, Silas said, looking at the money. He dropped his loot. Why would he leave the money? Because he's too heavy, Marty said. Or because he's hurt. Angie Duff put up a hell of a fight. Maybe she damaged him. Suddenly, a shout came from the back of the property, near Curtis's detached garage. We've got movement, a deputy screamed. In the garage! He's coming out. Silas turned, his heart hammering against his ribs. He ran toward the side of the house, his boots sliding in the loose gravel. The garage door was half. From the darkness inside, a figure emerged, moving with a strange, lurching gait. He was a young man, no more than 25, with dark eyes and a face that was covered in a mixture of black soot, sweat, and dried blood. He was wearing nothing but a pair of torn blue jeans that had been cut off at the knees, his bare chest pale and smeared with red dirt. In his right hand, he held 2 plastic car keys, their buttons clicking frantically as he tried to find a vehicle that would respond. Drop to the ground, Silas screamed, his serviced weapon aimed directly at the man's chest. Sheriff's office, do it now. The man did not drop. He stood in the sunlight, his head tilting to one side, a strange, vacant smile spreading across his lips. It was a smile that had no warmth in it, no fear, and no sanity. The voices, the man muttered, his voice surprisingly soft. The voices told me to do it. They said the blood would make the fire stop. Get down, Marty yelled, arriving from the side with his rifle raised. The man took 1 step forward, his bare feet leaving dusty prints on the concrete. Before he could take another, 2 SWAT officers lunged from the shadow of the garage, tackling him to the ground with a loud grunt. The key fobs flew from his hands, clattering onto the gravel. Silas stood over him as the officers pulled his arms behind his back, the handcuffs clicking shut with a dry, metallic sound. What's your name? Silas asked, his voice shaking with a cold rage. The man on the ground did not look at him. He looked at the dust, his lopsided smile still in place. Jeremiah, he whispered. Jeremiah Bean. I'm the one who makes them quiet. Part 4. The Confession of Jeremiah Bean. Chapter 7. The Room with No Windows. The interrogation room at the Lyon County Sheriff's Department was a small box of gray, concrete blocks, with a metal table bolted to the floor. The air was thick with the smell of floor wax and stale coffee. Jeremiah Bean sat in a metal chair, his hands shackled to his waist. He had been given a gray jail jumpsuit, but he had refused to wash the dried blood from his face. It sat on his skin like a mask, cracking around his eyes and mouth as he spoke. Silas Thorne sat across from him, a yellow legal pad open on the table. A tape recorder sat between them, its small red light glowing steadily. Do you understand your rights, Jeremiah? Silas asked, his voice flat. Yeah, Jeremiah said. He looked at the tape recorder, then at Silas's eyes. I know my rights. I want to talk. I want to tell you about the voices. What voices? Silas asked. The ones in my head, Jeremiah said, his voice dropping to a theatrical whisper. He began to lean forward, his eyes widening in an attempt to look wild, unhinged. They're like old radio stations, you know. They static and they scream. They tell me to do things. They said if I didn't kill the old people, the world would burn up. They said I had to do it to keep the balance. Silas didn't blink. He had seen too many junkies and thieves try to play the crazy card. After they realized they were facing the needle, Jeremiah's performance was clumsy, a third-grade theater project of schizophrenia that lacked the genuine terror of a truly broken mind. Jeremiah, Silas said, leaning forward. Stop the act. Jeremiah blinked, his smile faltering. You're not crazy, Silas said, his voice cold and sharp as a scalpel. You're a heroin addict. You ran out of money. You got desperate, and you saw 2 old people who lived alone on a quiet street. You went in there to rob them. And when they saw your face, you killed them because you're a coward. Jeremiah sat back, his shoulder muscles tightening. The vacant look in his eyes vanished, replaced by a hard, venomous glare that was entirely sober. You think you're smart, don't you? Jeremiah muttered. I know you killed them. Silas said. And I know how you did it. You stayed in that house for 2 days. You ate their food. You cooked their bacon. You used their TV. You lived with their bodies in the closet like they were a piece of furniture. Jeremiah stared at the metal table for a long moment. Then, slowly, he began to speak in a flat, monotone voice, the theatricality gone. They were old, Jeremiah said. They didn't need the money anyway. I was staying at my buddy's place down the road. I saw them. They had that nice silver truck. I knew they had cash. I just went in through the back window while they were sleeping. And Dorothy? Silas asked. She woke up, Jeremiah said, shrugged his shoulders. She started screaming. I had the gun, this little .22. I stole from a truck in Reno. I shot her. Then the old man came running in, trying to hit me with a lamp. I shot him too. He didn't want to die. I had to shoot him 3 times before he stopped moving. And then you stayed. I didn't have anywhere else to go, Jeremiah said, his voice entirely devoid of remorse. My buddy's place was hot. The Papes had food. They had a nice TV. I just put them in the closet, so I didn't have to look at them. The smell got bad after a while. So I used some of their dish soap on the floor to make it smell like lemons. But it didn't work. Why did you go to the Mustang exit? I wanted to get out of town, Jeremiah said. I took their silver truck, but the engine was acting up. I got off at the Mustang exit, because the red light was on. Then I saw that guy, the guy at the gas station. He was sweeping the lot. Eli Vance, Silas said. Yeah, whatever, Jeremiah said. He saw me in the Pape's truck. He looked at me funny. I thought he knew, so I told him my truck was broken down. He walked over to help me. I got him behind the sign, where no one could see from the highway, and I shot him. And why did you pull his pants down, Jeremiah? Silas asked, his fists clenching under the table. I had to drag him, Jeremiah said, as if explaining something simple to a child. He was heavy. I grabbed him by the pants, but they just slid down. I didn't care. I just wanted him in the ditch. Then I took his green truck and went back to Fern Lake. Why did you go back to the scene of the first murder? Silas asked. I left my bag there, Jeremiah said. My heroin, my needles. I couldn't leave them in the house. But when I got back, I saw the police cars down the street. I panicked. I tried to burn the truck in the garage to get rid of the prints, but the fire wouldn't start right. So I ran to the next house. Angie Duff's house, Silas said. She was a bitch, Jeremiah said, his face twisting with sudden anger. She didn't have any money. She didn't have anything. I just wanted her keys. But she hit me. She hit me with an iron skillet. She almost broke my jaw. I had to shoot her 3 times before she dropped. And then that old man, the guy in the yard, he came in with a garden tool. I shot him too. But the gun jammed. I had to use the kitchen knife. Jeremiah looked up at Silas, his eyes cold and dark. I should have got away. If she hadn't hit me, I'd be in Oregon by now. Silas sat back, his heart cold. He had spent his career looking into the eyes of murderers. But Jeremiah Bean was different. There was no rage in him, no passion, and no grand madness. He was simply a void of human shape filled with nothing but a cold, predatory hunger that had consumed 5 innocent lives for the price of a few bags of heroin in a night in a clean bed. We're done here, Silas said, standing up. You're going to prison, Jeremiah, and you're never coming out. Part 5. The Weight of the Dust. Chapter 8. The Courtroom on the Hill. The trial of Jeremiah Bean was a brief, mechanical affair that took place in the Lyon County Courthouse in Yerington. The building was an old, brick structure surrounded by tall cottonwood trees, its halls smelling of floor polish and old paper. The courtroom was packed to capacity every day. The families of the victims sat on the wooden benches, their faces pale and silent under the fluorescent lights. Mae Vance sat on the right side, her hands clenched in her lap, her eyes fixed on the back of Jeremiah's head. Jeremiah sat at the defense table, wearing a blue suit that was too large for him. His defense attorney, a public defender named Miller, made a half-hearted attempt to raise the issue of mental compromise. But the tape of Jeremiah's confession had already been played for the judge. The transition from his fake voices to his cold, calculated description of the murders was too clear, too damning. On October 14, 2014, the jury returned its verdict after less than 2 hours of deliberation. Guilty, the foreman read, the word repeating 5 times in the quiet room. Guilty of first-degree murder. During the sentencing phase, the families were allowed to speak. Mae Vance walked to the podium, her voice steady but her hands shaking as she held a framed photograph of Eli. My brother Eli was a good man, she said, looking directly at Jeremiah. He worked 3 jobs. He helped people who didn't have anything. He never hurt a soul in his life. And you killed him for a truck that didn't even have a full tank of gas. You are not a human being. Jeremiah, you are a wolf, and we don't keep wolves in the house. When it was his turn to speak, Jeremiah stood up, looked at the judge, and shrugged. I don't have nothing to say, he said. The judge, a gray-haired man named Thompson who had lived in the county for 40 years, looked at Jeremiah with a mixture of disgust and pity. Jeremiah Bean, the judge said, his voice echoing in the rafters. You have shown a complete and total lack of human empathy. You took the lives of 5 innocent people who had done nothing to you. People who were the very bedrock of our community. For these crimes, there is only one just punishment. He paused, the silence in the room so heavy that the ticking of the wall clock sounded like hammer blows. I sentence you to death, the judge said. May God have more mercy on your soul than you had on your victims. Chapter 9. The Cross in the Sagebrush. 3 years later, the Nevada wind still blew hard across the Mustang exit. Silas Thorne stood by the edge of the access road, his hands in his pockets. He had retired from the sheriff's office 6 months prior, but he still found himself driving out to the high desert on quiet mornings, when the memories of the old cases made it hard to sleep. At the edge of the ditch, where Elijah Vance's body had been found, a simple wooden cross had been driven into the gravel. It was made of rough-cut pine, weathered to a dull gray by the sun and the wind. At the center, someone had written Eli in black paint, and a small silk rose, faded to a pale pink, was wired to the wood. Silas walked down the bank, his knees stiff. He reached out and touched the wood of the cross, the splinters rough against his fingers. In this country, the dirt was shallow, but the roots of the people ran deep. The memory of that May morning would never entirely fade from the settlements along the interstate. The houses on Cedar Creek Drive had been rebuilt, and the yellow cottage where Angie Duff had lived was now occupied by a young family with children who played in the yard. But the quiet remained a quiet that was no longer just the silence of the desert, but the silence of 5 empty spaces that could never be filled. Silas looked up at the highway, where a long line of trucks was moving toward the eastern horizon, their engines roaring against the wind. There were wolves among them, he knew. There always would be. But as long as there were people like Eli Vance, who would stand in the dark to help a stranger, the desert would never entirely belong to the wild. He turned and walked back to his car, leaving the cross to stand against the wind. Chapter 1. The Whispering Pines of Oak. The dark of the Florida interior did not simply fall. It pooled, thick and humid, rising from the limestone sinks and the blackwater creeks until it choked out the final, orange-pink bruised light of the southern horizon. Along the county line stretch of Black Creek Road, the slash pines stood like uniformed sentinels, their needles knitting together a canopy that excluded both the moonlight and the dry breeze of the late autumn. In the cab of her unmarked sedan, Detective Clara Vance sat in the quiet that only exists in places where the human footprint is temporary. She was 41, with the permanent, slight squint of someone who had spent her youth looking into the glare of Florida waterways and her adulthood under the flickering hum of precinct fluorescent tubes. For 12 years she had worked the Jacksonville Sheriff's Bureau, first in the frantic, exhausting trenches of child exploitation, and later in the grim, methodical world of sex crime. Those years had left her with a quietness that some of her colleagues mistook for coldness. It wasn't coldness. It was a carefully cultivated economy of spirit. In a world where the worst human impulses were laid bare on a daily basis, one did not waste energy on superficial displays. She had transferred to homicide 2 years prior. It was an elite, insular fraternity predominantly male, fiercely protective of its territory, and deeply suspicious of anyone who had not paid their dues in the patrol divisions or property heist units. But Clara had earned her place. Her first major case, a cold case homicide involving a body pulled from a retention pond behind a strip mall on Beach Boulevard, had been solved not through a sudden flash of dramatic intuition, but through 48 consecutive hours of cross-referencing, toll booth transponder logs, and trash collection schedules. She had proven that she could outwork them, outthink them, and, when necessary, outweight them. The phone on her dashboard vibrated, its small screen illuminating the interior of the car with a pale blue glow. It was Detective Arlo Finch from Missing Persons. Clara Finch's voice was thin, competing with the static of the rural cell towers. We're out near the old timber lease off the state road. The cadaver unit just got an alert. You might want to start heading this way. The Prather girl, Clara asked, her fingers tightening slightly on the steering wheel. We think so. Or what's left of her. We've been dragging this county for 3 weeks, Clara. But the dog just sat down near the creek bed. It's bad. The hogs have been through here. Clara put the car in gear. I'm 10 minutes out. The disappearance of Sarah Prather had begun as a routine report 3 weeks prior, on October 5th. Her mother, Eleanor Prather, a retired school bus driver, who had raised Sarah alone in a small, wood-frame cottage near the salt marshes of the Trout River, had walked into the North Side substation with a fading color photograph. Sarah was 32, a woman of bright, erratic energy who sang karaoke at the roadside taverns along Highway 17, and lived life with an open, sometimes reckless vulnerability. She was the kind of person who made friends in the space of a single cigarette on a tavern porch, who rode on the backs of motorcycles with men she had known for 20 minutes, and who believed, despite all evidence to the contrary, that the world was fundamentally decent. She didn't come home after the Thursday ladies' night, Eleanor had told the intake officer. Her voice had been steady then, the product of a lifetime of hard work and simple faith, but her eyes had been wild. Sarah always calls, even when she's had too much, or when she stays with a friend. She knows my heart is weak. She wouldn't leave me wondering. For the first 10 days, the case had lingered in the limbo of adult missing persons. In the eyes of the system, a 32-year-old woman with a history of minor drug possession and a fondness for nightlife had every right to disappear if she chose. But Clara had read the initial report. She had seen the photograph of Sarah smiling, holding a microphone at some forgotten bar, her eyes bright with a desperate, beautiful desire to be seen. Clara had felt a familiar, cold weight settle in her chest. People like Sarah Prather did not simply walk away from their lives. They were taken. As Clara turned her sedan off the asphalt of Black Creek Road and onto the rutted, sand-choked trail of the timber lease, the headlights swept over the low pump. The sand was white and loose, the tires groaning as they fought for traction. A mile into the scrub, the forest opened into a clearing where 2 patrol cruisers and a utility van were parked, their blue and red emergency strobes painting the pine trunks in rhythmic, violent hues. Clara parked, grabbed her flashlight and her heavy boots, and stepped out into the humid night. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth, decaying pine needles, and something else of faint, sweetish temps that made the back of her throat tight. Detective Vance, a deputy said, tipping his hat as she approached the yellow crime scene tape that had been strung between 2 scrub oaks. Where's Finch? She asked. Down by the gully. Watch your step, ma'am. The ground's soft, and there's copperheads out tonight. Clara ducked under the tape. She walked down a slope where the sand gave way to black, organic muck. The flashlight beam bounced off the cypress knees. Finch was standing near a handler from the search and rescue team. The handler's dog, a red-boned coonhound named Buster, was sitting quietly on a patch of dry pine straw, his tail occasionally thumping the ground. Clara, Finch said, turning his flashlight toward the ground. Over here. In the center of the beam, half buried in the black loam, and surrounded by the white, delicate roots of a wild fern, lay a human skull. It was scrubbed clean by the elements and the small, industrious scavengers of the Florida woods. In the harsh lead light, it looked like a piece of discarded porcelain, polished and yellowed by the tannin-rich waters of the creek. Jesus, Clara whispered. There's more, Finch said, his voice flat. The dog picked up the scent about 50 yards back. We've found a pair of cheap canvas sneakers. The blue ones, the mother described, and a faded t-shirt with a motorcycle emblem on it. The animals. They didn't leave much. The pelvic bone was 30 feet up that bank. Looks like a coyote or a feral hog dragged it up there. Clara knelt in the muck. She did not touch the school. The forensics team was already on their way from the city. She looked at the small, delicate structure of the jaw, the empty sockets that had once held the hopeful, wild eyes of Sarah. This is her, Clara said. We'll need dental records to be sure, Finch said. But the clothes match, and the location, it's only 5 miles from the tavern where she was last seen. Clara stood up, wiping the damp sand from her knees. The sense of professional detachment she had spent years building felt thin tonight. She looked up at the pine canopy, where the wind was finally beginning to stir, making the needles hiss like distant water. It's not a missing persons case anymore, Arlo, she said softly. It's mine now. Chapter 2. The Anatomy of the Forest. By dawn, the clearing off Black Creek Road had been transformed into a cold, clinical walk space. The flashing lights of the cruisers were replaced by the harsh, white glare of portable Halagian towers, powered by generators that filled the quiet woods with a low, industrial roar. Clara sat on the tailgate of the crime scene technician's van, drinking lukewarm coffee from a paper cup. The state forensic anthropologist, Dr. Evelyn Reyes, had arrived from the University of Florida at 3 in the morning. Reyes was a small, intense woman with graying hair who treated human remains not with horror, but with a deep, reverent curiosity. "The soil here is highly acidic," Clara Reyes said, walking over to the van with a small plastic tray containing several small bone fragments. She was wearing blue nitrile gloves that were stained with black muck. Combined with the high humidity and the insect activity, decomposition would have been rapid, but the primary factor here is the carnivores. "Hogs?" Clara asked. "Hogs, coyotes, raccoons, opossums," Reyes nodded. "In the south, a body left in the open is an ecosystem. The soft tissue was likely gone within 10 to 12 days. The bones were then dispersed. We've recovered approximately 40% of the skeleton so far. We found the left femur in a gopher tortoise burrow. But the skull and the thoracic vertebrae are the most important." "Have you found a cause of death?" Reyes set the tray down on the tailgate. She picked up a small, curved boner ribband, held it up to the light of the Halagan Tower. "Look here, you see this small, semicircular indentation on the posterior border of the fifth rib?" Clara leaned in, squinting. The bone was gray-white, and near the edge, there was a clean, crescent-shaped notch, no larger than a fingernail. "It looks like a nick," Clara said. "It's a bevel," Reyes corrected. "It was made by a high-velocity projectile, specifically, a bullet. It entered from the back, nicked the rib, and then..." She picked up another fragment, a portion of a vertebra. "Look at the fragmentation on the body of this thoracic vertebra. The bone is shattered outward. The bullet traveled from back to front, slightly upward. She was shot in the back." Clara, probably while she was running, or perhaps while she was kneeling. Clara felt a cold knot tighten in her stomach. A handgun. Based on the size of the notch and the fragmentation, I'd wager a small to medium caliber, a .32 or a .38. We'll need the ballistics team to search the dirt beneath where the torso was found. If the bullet passed through, it might be buried in the sand. Clara stood up and walked back to the edge of the gully. The forensics team was now using wire screens to sift through the topsoil, searching for teeth, small bones, and lead fragments. The woods, which had seemed so mysterious and vast the night before, now felt small, dirty, and thoroughly dissected. She thought of Eleanor Prather, sitting in her small cottage, waiting for the call that she knew was coming but hoped would never arrive. Clara had delivered dozens of death notifications in her career, but they never grew easier. Each one was a unique, devastating rupture in the fabric of a family's life, a moment that split their history into two distinct epochs, before and after. Vance, her partner, Detective Marcus Dane, said as he walked down the path. Dane was a former college football player, a large man with a gentle demeanor and a sharp, analytical mind. He had been with Homicide for 5 years and was Clara's closest confidant in the department. "The captain wants to know if we're ready to make the notification. We need the dental comparison first, Marcus," Clara said. "I don't want to tell that woman her daughter is dead based on a t-shirt and a pair of shoes. We owe her certainty." "The medical examiner's office in St. John's has the records," Dane said. "They're running them now. But the captain's right, the media's already sniffed us out. A local TV station has a van parked at the entrance of the Timborlees. If we don't tell Eleanor, she's going to see it on the new news." Clara swore softly under her breath. "All right, let's go. We'll do it now." The drive to the Prather home was silent. The landscape shifted from the rural timber tracts to the strip malls of North Jacksonville, and finally to the low-lying marshy neighborhoods along the Trout River. Here, the homes were modest older wood frame houses with tin roofs, surrounded by ancient oaks draped in Spanish moss. The air smelled of salt water, mud, and the distant, chemical temps of the paper mills. Eleanor's cottage was at the end of a dirt road that terminated at the river bank. A rusted outboard motor sat on a stand in the yard, and a collection of wind chimes made from old oyster shells hung from the porch ceiling, clacking softly in the river breeze. When Clara and Dane stepped onto the porch, the screen door opened before they could knock. Eleanor stood there, wearing a faded floral apron over her housedress. She looked at the gold shields hanging from their belts, and her hands began to tremble. "You found her," Eleanor said. It wasn't a question. "Miss Prather," Clara said, her voice dropping to a gentle, quiet register. Eleanor didn't move for a long moment. She looked past them, out toward the river where a brown pelican was diving for mullet. Then, she stepped aside. The living room was small and smelled of pine sol and old paper. The walls were covered with photographs of Sarah at various ages, a chubby toddler in a plastic wading pool, a middle schooler with braces and a awkward, beautiful smile, a young woman in a sequined dress, holding a trophy from a local talent show. "We found some remains last night," Clara said, sitting on the edge of a faded velvet sofa. She took the older woman's dry, papery hand in her own. "Near the timber lease off Black Creek Road. We believe they belong to Sarah." Eleanor's face didn't change. It was as if she had already lived through this moment 1,000 times in her mind during the past 3 weeks. "The animals," she whispered. "Did they? Was she out there a long time?" Clara looked at Dane, then back at Eleanor. In her line of work, honesty was a terrible but necessary mercy. "She was out there for about a month, Eleanor. We believe she died the night she disappeared. She didn't suffer for long." "Who did it?" Eleanor's voice was suddenly sharp, her eyes clearing of the fog of grief. "Who put my baby in those woods?" "We don't know yet," Clara said, "but we are going to find out. I promise you that." Eleanor pulled her hand away and stood up. She walked over to the mantelpiece and picked up a small, ceramic music box. She wound it, and it began to play a tinny, metallic version of Amazing Grace. "Sarah was a singer," Eleanor said, her back to them. "She had a voice that could make a stone cry. She'd go down to those bars, those terrible places, just because she wanted people to hear her. She wanted them to love her. She didn't see the bad in people, detective. She thought everyone was like her." "We know she was at the Boots and Bottles Tavern the night she disappeared," Clara said. "We're going there now. We're going to talk to everyone who saw her." "Don't you let 'em say she was just some barfly," Eleanor said, turning around, her face wet with tears. "She was my daughter. She was my only child. She was all I had in this world." "I won't," Clara said. "I promise you, Eleanor. We're going to bring her home." Chapter 3. The Neon Wilderness. The Boots and Bottles was a low-slung, concrete block building located on a desolate stretch of Highway 17, just south of the Nassau County line. It was surrounded by a gravel parking lot that was empty during the day, save for a few rusted pickup trucks and a delivery van. A neon sign in the window, shaped like a foaming mug of beer, flickered weakly in the midday sun. Inside, the tavern was dark and smelled of stale draft beer, fried food, and decades of tobacco smoke. The walls were wood-paneled and decorated with old license plates, neon beer signs, and a large, velvet painting of a howling wolf. A pool table sat in the back under a low-hanging green lamp, and a jukebox was silent in the corner. The bartender was a middle-aged woman named Brenda, with bleached blonde hair and a tired, heavy-lidded expression. She was wiping down the counter with a greasy rag when Clara and Dane walked in. "We're not open for another hour," Brenda said without looking up. Clara pulled her badge and set it on the bar. "Detective Vance. This is Detective Dane. We're here about Sarah." Brenda stopped wiping. She looked at the badge, then at Clara. She let out a long, ragged sigh and threw the rag into a sink. "I heard they found her body. It was on the radio this morning. I've been sick to my stomach ever since." "You knew her?" Dane asked, pulling up a bar stool. "Everybody knew Sarah," Brenda said. "She was a regular. She'd come in on Thursday nights for karaoke. Like I said, she was a sweet girl. But she had a lot of drama. She was always falling in love with the wrong guys. She'd get a few drinks in her and start crying about some fella. And then 10 minutes later, she'd be up on that stage, singing her heart out." "Tell us about the night of October 12th, Clara said. "That was a Thursday. She was here." "Yeah, she was here," Brenda nodded. "She was real upset that day. She'd had a big blowout with her boyfriend, Don. She came in early, around 6, and she was already tipsy. She kept saying she wanted to have a girls' night. But her friends didn't show up until later. She was just sitting at the corner of the bar, drinking draft and crying." "What about the boyfriend?" Dane asked. "Did he show up?" "No, not inside," Brenda said. But Sarah was paranoid. She kept looking out the window, saying she thought Dan was parked across the street, watching her. He was like That real jealous. He didn't like her coming here alone. Did she leave with anyone? Clara asked. Well, that's the thing, Brenda said, leaning closer. Around 11, the place was pretty full. There was a group of bikers in the back. Sarah was talking to this one guy, a big fella, bald, with a red beard. He wasn't one of the regular locals, but I'd seen him in here a few times before. He rode a big, blue motorcycle. Sarah was asking around for a ride to some party on Trout River Road. She asked a couple of people, and this biker guy said he'd take her. Did you see them leave? Yeah, it was around midnight. I watched them walk out. Sarah got on the back of his bike. She didn't even have a helmet on. He fired up that motor, and they just roared off down the highway. That was the last I saw of her. Do you know the biker's name? Clara asked. No. Brenda shook her head. But I know he didn't ride a Harley. He rode some kind of Japanese bike, a Honda, I think. Around here, the real bikers. They don't like that. They call them rice burners. It was a bit of a joke in the bar. A Honda, Clara repeated, making a note in her pad. Anything else about him? An accent? Tattoos? He had a lot of tattoos, Brenda said. But I didn't get a close look. He was quiet, kept to himself until Sarah started talking to him. He had this, I don't know, this strange way of talking, like he was from somewhere else. But he was trying to sound like a local. He was a big, scary-looking guy, like a Viking or something. Clara stood up and looked around the bar. Do you have security cameras? Brenda laughed, a dry, hacking sound. In here, no. The owner doesn't want cameras. Too many of our customers are supposed to be at work or at home with their wives. Cameras are bad for business. What about across the street? Dane asked. There's the auto parts store, Brenda said, pointing toward the window. And the marine supply place. They might have cameras, but they're closed now. Clara walked out of the bar and stood in the bright sunlight of the parking lot. She looked across the 4-lane highway. Directly opposite the Boots and Bottles was a small, independent marine engine repair shop. On the corner of the building's metal eave, she spotted a small, white dome camera pointed directly toward the highway in the bar's entrance. Marcus, she said, pointing. We need to get that footage. I'm on it, Dane said. I'll track down the owner of the shop. While Dane made the calls, Clara walked around the perimeter of the Boots and Bottles. The gravel was littered with cigarette butts, beer bottle caps, and broken glass. She walked to the edge of the highway, where the asphalt was dark with oil stains. She tried to imagine that night, the roar of the motorcycle, the warm, humid air rushing past Sarah's face, the sense of escape she must have felt as she left her troubles behind, riding into the dark with a stranger. It was a common story in Florida, brief, fatal intersection of vulnerability and malice. But Clara knew that to solve it, she couldn't treat Sarah as a statistic. She had to understand her choices, her fears, and her final, desperate moments. By late afternoon, Dane had secured the digital video recorder from the marine shop. They returned to the precinct and set up the files on a large monitor in the homicide bullpen. The footage was grainy and black and white, the quality degraded by the low light conditions and the glare of the highway. But at 12:04 a.m. on October 3rd, the camera captured a figure matching Sarah's description: pale pants, a dark top, walking out of the Boots and Bottles. Beside her was a tall, heavily built man. He was wearing a dark leather vest over a t-shirt. His head was bald, reflecting the yellow light of the tavern's sign, and he had a full, thick beard. They walked to a motorcycle parked near the edge of the lot. The bike was large, with saddlebags and a high windshield. The man mounted the bike. Sarah climbed onto the pillion seat behind him, wrapping her arms around his waist. The tail light of the motorcycle flared, and then the machine pulled out onto Highway 17, heading south. Can we get a plate? Dane asked, leaning in close to the screen. No, Clara said, her eyes fixed on the moving pixels. The angle's too sharp, and the headlight of a car passing behind them blows out the exposure. But look at the frame of the bike. See, the engine casing? It's a transverse. That's a Honda Goldwing, or a Valkyrie. It's not a Harley. A Honda, Dane muttered. A big, bold biker with a red beard who rides a Honda in a Harley town. That's not a common profile. Clara, we can find this guy. We need to find the boyfriend first, Clara said, shutting off the monitor. He was jealous, he was angry, and he was watching her. Let's find out where Daniel Dollison was at midnight on October 12th. Chapter 4. The Jealous Shadow. Daniel Dollison lived in a rusted single-wide trailer behind a salvage yard near the Trout River. The yard was filled with the carcasses of old cars, overgrown with weeds, and wild grapevines. A large, chain-link fence surrounded the property, and 2 mixed-breed dogs ran along the perimeter, barking furiously as Clara's sedan pulled up the drive. A man stepped out of the trailer's screen door. He was thin, with wiry muscles, dark hair slicked back with grease, and a face that was prematurely lined by hard living and resentment. He was wearing a dirty white tank top and greasy work pants. "State Police," Dane said, stepping out of the car and showing his badge. "You, Daniel Dolison?" The man looked at the badge, then at Clara. His shoulders slumped, and he let out a dry, rattling cough. "You're here about Sarah. My sister called me." "Can we talk inside, Don?" Clara asked. "Ain't nothing to talk about inside," Dolison said, sitting down on the wooden steps of the porch. He took a pack of generic cigarettes from his pocket, lit one with trembling hands, and blew a thin stream of gray smoke into the hot air. "I didn't do nothing to her. I loved her." "We heard you two had a big fight the day she disappeared," Clara said, leaning against the fender of her car. "The bartender at Boots and Bottles said Sarah was terrified of you. She said you were watching her." Dolison looked down at his boots. "We had an argument." "Yeah, we were always having arguments. I wanted her to move in with me. Here, I wanted us to be a family, but she wouldn't do it. She said she had to take care of her mother. She said this place was too dirty, too remote. She was always looking for something better. You know, she thought she was too good for this." "Where were you on the night of October 12th, Dan?" Dane asked, his voice firm but professional. "I was at my sister's house," Dolison said. "She lives over in Callahan. After Sarah made me drop her off at her mom's, I was so mad I couldn't think straight. I went over to my sister's place around 8. We drank some beer, talked about Sarah, and I crashed on her couch. I didn't leave until the next morning." "Can your sister verify that?" "Yeah, she and her husband was there too. Ask them. I didn't go near that bar. I knew if I went there, I'd end up in a fight with someone." "Did you know she left with a biker?" Clara asked. Dollison's face darkened, his jaw tightening. "She was always doing that, getting on the back of some guy's bike. She loved the thrill of it. She didn't care who they were. I told her 100 times one of these days, 'You're going to get on the back of a bike with the wrong man, Sarah.' But she wouldn't listen to me. She thought she was bulletproof." "Did she know anyone who rode a blue Honda?" Clara asked. Dollison shook his head. "No. Most of the guys we hung out with rode Harleys, real bikes. I don't know no one with a Honda." Clara watched him closely. His grief seemed real. It was mixed with a bitter, defensive anger, but there was a raw, exhausted quality to his voice that was difficult to fake. "Did you ever go down to Black Creek Road down?" "Never heard of it," he said. "I don't go out to the state forest. Nothing out there but pine trees and mosquitoes." "We're going to need to speak with your sister," Dane said, "and we'll need your phone logs from that night." "Take whatever you want," Dollison said, throwing the cigarette butt into the dirt and crushing it with his heel. "I didn't hurt her. I wanted to protect her from all this. And now she's gone. And some bastard's out there walking around while my girl is in a box." 2 hours later, Clara and Dane sat in the Callahan home of Dollison's sister, Marie. Marie was a quiet, sensible woman who worked as a dental assistant. She confirmed her brother's story without hesitation. "Dan arrived at 8, Marie said, serving them ice water in plastic cups. "He was a mess. He was crying, saying Sarah was going to leave him for good this time. My husband, Robert, gave him a couple of beers and we sat on the back porch until midnight. Then Don went to sleep on the pull-out sofa. He was there when I got up at 6 to make coffee. He didn't leave the house. Detective, I'm sure of it." "He didn't make any calls?" Clara asked. "He tried to call her a few times around 9, but she didn't answer," Marie said. "After that, he turned his phone off. He was just too tired to fight anymore." Clara looked at Dane. The alibi was solid. Robert Maury's husband confirmed the timeline in a separate interview. Unless there was a massive, coordinated conspiracy among 3 people with no criminal histories, Daniel Dolison was not their killer. "So we're back to the biker," Dane said as they drove back to Jacksonville, the man on the blue Honda. "He's the last person to see her alive," Clara said, her eyes fixed on the road ahead. "He took her from that bar, and 3 weeks later her bones are found in a ditch 5 miles away. He's our guy. Marcus, we just need a name." Chapter 5. The Biker on the Honda. The search for the bald biker who rode a blue Honda began in the database of the Florida Department of Highway Safety and Motor Vehicles. Clara sat at her desk, surrounded by empty coffee cups, while the computer screen flickered with registration data. There were over 12,000 blue Honda motorcycles registered in the state of Florida, but when she filtered the search by Nassau, Duval, Johns counties, the list shrank to 480. Let's narrow it down by style, Clara said to Dane, who was leaning over her shoulder. Brenda said it was a big biker touring model. That means a Goldwing, a Valkyrie, or a Shadow 1100. That brings us down to 8. Now cross-reference those owners with criminal records, Dane said, particularly violent felonies, sex offenses, or domestic abuse. Clara's fingers flew over the keyboard. The database word, processing the queries. A list of 26 names appeared on the screen. She began to click through the driver's license photographs. Most of the men were older retirees in their 60s and 70s who used their Goldwings for cross-country touring. But near the bottom of the list, a photograph caught her eye. The man was 39 years old. His head was completely shaved, and he had a thick, bushy red beard that fell down over his collar. His eyes were small, pale blue, and set deep beneath a heavy, prominent brow. He looked like a man who had been carved out of a block of northern stone. His name was John Wayne Johnson. His registered address was a mobile home park on the north side of Jacksonville, near the Trout River. "Look at his record," Clara said, her voice dropping. Dane leaned in. Assault with a deadly weapon. Georgia, 2004. Domestic violence. Duval County, 2011. Serving 2 years probation for a weapons charge. He's currently working as an independent, long-haul truck driver. "And look at his aliases," Clara said, pointing to the screen. "Magni, nickname, Viking." "Viking," Dane said. The bartender said he looked like a Viking, and he spoke with an accent. "Let's run his name through the Border Patrol database," Clara said. "If his name is Magni..." The search came back blank. There was no record of a Magni Thorvaldsen entering the United States from Iceland, Denmark, or any other Nordic country. John Wayne Johnson was born in Waycross, Georgia, in 1974. His mother, Martha Johnson, lived in Jacksonville. "He's a local boy," Clara said, a cold smile touching her lips. "He's no more Icelandic than I am. He's a guy from Georgia who spent his whole life playing a character." "Why the Viking persona?" Dane asked. "Power," Clara said. "Intimidation. Some men need to build a myth around themselves because they're too disgusted by who they really are. They want people to fear them because fear feels like respect." Clara picked up her phone. "Let's find out where Johnny Wayne is today." Using his truck log data, which was regulated by the Department of Transportation, they found that Johnson's rig was currently parked at a diesel repair yard on North Main Street, just 2 miles from the Boots and Bottles. He was scheduled to pick up a load of timber the following morning. "Let's go pay the Viking a visit," Clara said. The repair yard was a vast, oil-stained expanse of gravel, surrounded by a high chain-link fence, topped with razor wire. Dozens of semi-trucks sat in various stages of disassembly, their massive hoods tilted forward like the jaws of giant insects. In the back of the lot, next to a rusted container, they found Johnson's Rigger black Peterbilt with custom chrome exhaust pipes. Standing near the front bumper, grease-stained and holding a heavy steel wrench, was John Wayne Johnson. In person, he was even larger than his photograph suggested. He stood at least 6'4", with broad, thick shoulders and a barreled chest. He was wearing a greasy leather vest over his bare skin, revealing arms that were covered in crude, blue-black tattoos of Norse runes and Viking axes. "John Johnson?" Clara asked, stepping out of the car. The man slowly turned. He looked at Clara and Dane with a calm, indifferent expression. He did not run. He did not flinch. He simply stood there, holding the heavy wrench like a war hammer. "In this country, they call me John," he said. His voice was deep, gravelly, and had a distinct, slow, lilt-ah faint, guttural accent that sounded vaguely Scandinavian. "But my true name is Magni. I am of the blood of Eric the Red." Clara had to fight the urge to roll her eyes. "Well, Magni, we're with the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office. We'd like to talk to you about Sarah Johnson's expression didn't change, but his eyes narrowed slightly. He set the wrench down on the bumper of his truck. "Sarah, the girl from the tavern. I heard she was found." "You remember her?" Dane asked. "Of course," Johnson said, speaking with that same artificial accent. "She was a bright spirit, very beautiful. She sang like an angel that night." "We have video of her getting on the back of your motorcycle that night, John," Clara said, Where did you take her? She asked me for a ride to a party, Johnson said. On Trout River Road. She said she had friends there. I am a gentleman, so I agreed to take her. I do not like to see a lady stranded in a bad place. And did you go to the party? Yes, Johnson nodded. We rode to the house. It was a dark place, back in the woods. I stopped my bike in the driveway. Sarah went to the door. She told me to wait, that she would find out if it was safe. I saw some men looking out of the windows. They looked sketchy, like they wanted to steal my bike. I did not feel good about it. So what did you do? Clara asked. I left, Johnson said, shrugging his massive shoulders. Sarah stayed. She said she would be fine. I rode home to my trailer. I did not see her again after that. I thought she was with her friends. What was the address of this house? Dane asked. I do not remember the number, Johnson said, but I can show you. It is not far from here. I can ride with you and point it out. Clara looked at Dane. Johnson's cooperativeness was surprising. Usually, guilty men lied or refused to speak without an attorney, but Johnson was calm, almost eager to help. All right, Magni, Clara said. Let's go for a ride. Show us where you left her. Chapter 6. The House of Shadows. The route Johnson directed them to take was a labyrinth of unpaved roads that wound through the low-lying oak hammock near the Trout River. The trees grew close to the road, their branches meeting overhead to form a dark, green tunnel. It is down this way, Johnson said from the back seat of Clara's sedan. He had his hands cuffed in front of him, a standard safety protocol for transporting suspects, though Clara had framed it as a routine measure for his own protection. The house was old. Wood frame, no lights on when we arrived. He pointed to a clearing where a small, dilapidated cottage sat in a grove of overgrown orange trees. The roof was sagging, the porch steps were rotted, and several windows were boarded up with weathered plywood. It looked like a place that had been abandoned for years. This is it, Johnson said. The party was here. Clara parked the car. She and Dane got out, bringing Johnson with them. They walked up the sandy driveway. The air was silent, save for the hum of cicadas in the high branches. Clara walked onto the porch. The door was locked, but she could see through a gap in the plywood window cover. The interior of the house was empty. There was no furniture, no beer bottles, no signs of a party. The floorboards were covered with a thick layer of gray dust and dry leaves that had blown in through cracks in the walls. She pulled a business card from her pocket, wrote her name and cell phone number on the back, and slid it into the gap between the door and the frame. You're sure this was the place, John? Clara asked, turning back to him. Yes, Johnson said, his face impassive. This is where I dropped her off. I saw people inside. I saw the light of a television, and men looking out the window. Maybe they left after that night. Maybe they cleaned it up. Clara didn't answer. She knew he was lying. A party of bikers and locals would have left some trace tire tracks in the sand, trash in the yard, broken glass. The dust inside the house had been undisturbed for months, perhaps years. They drove Johnson back to the repair yard and released him. Thank you for your help, Magni, Clara said as she unlocked his cuffs. I hope you find the men who did this, Johnson said, rubbing his wrists. It is a terrible thing to kill a woman. In the old days, a man who did such a thing would be dragged behind horses. He climbed back onto the cab of his truck, and Clara and Dane got into their car. What do you think? Dane asked. He's lying through his artificial teeth, Clara said. The house is empty. It's been empty for a long time. He chose that place because it's remote, and he thought we'd buy the story that some mysterious, sketchy man took her. But why would he show us the place if he's guilty? Because he's a narcissist, Marcus, Clara said. He wants to be part of the investigation. He wants to see what we know, to stay one step ahead of us. And he thinks he's smarter than we are because he's a Viking and we're just local cops. The next morning, Clara's phone rang. It was the owner of the Trout River cottage, a retired carpenter named Thomas Miller. I found your card in my door, Detective, Miller said. What's this about? Mr. Miller, we're investigating a homicide, Clara said. We have information that there may have been a party at your property on the night of October 12th. Did you rent the house out, or do you have tenants? Miller laughed. A party? No way. My wife and I have been renovating that place ourselves. We go out there every Saturday morning. The house is locked up tight, and we have a security chain on the gate. There hasn't been anyone in that house since we bought it last year, and we certainly didn't have no party. Are you sure no one could have broken him? The locks were intact when we went there on the 14th, Miller said. And we didn't see any signs of anyone being there. No trash. No footprints. It's been dead quiet out there. Clara thanked him and hung up. It's confirmed, she said to Dane. The alibi is a fabrication. John Wayne Johnson is our prime suspect. Now we need to dismantle his life. Chapter 7. The Ex-Wife's Tale. The search for the truth about John Wayne Johnson led Clara to a small, neat brick home in a quiet subdivision in North Side. The house belonged to Samantha Burleson. Samantha was 34, a nurse who lived with her 2 young children from a previous marriage. When Clara knocked on the door, Samantha opened it, her face pale and her eyes nervous. "Detective Vance?" she asked. "Yes, Samantha. Thank you for agreeing to speak with me." Samantha led Clara into a cozy living room where a children's movie was playing on the television. She sat on the edge of her chair, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I was so scared when you called," Samantha said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I don't want Johnny to know I'm talking to you. He still calls me. He says he wants to be there for my kids, but he really just wants to keep tabs on me." "How did you meet him, Samantha?" Clara asked, setting her notebook on the coffee table. "It was in 2008, Samantha said. "I was just getting out of a really bad marriage. I went to a friend's birthday party, and Johnny was there. He was so different then. He was quiet, mysterious. He had this bad boy image. But he was sweet to me. He told me he was from Iceland, that his family was very wealthy and powerful back home. I was young, and I guess I wanted to believe him." "And after you got married?" Samantha's face tightened. "Everything changed the day we said I do. It was like a switch went off in his head. He went from being this happy-go-lucky guy to someone who literally terrified me. He didn't hit me often, but the verbal threats, he'd look at me with those cold, dead eyes and say, 'If you ever leave me, I'll bury you in the woods where the animals will eat you.' He was obsessed with Norse mythology, with Thor and Odin. He thought he was some kind of warrior." "Did he have an accent when you met him?" "Yes," Samantha said, a bitter smile on her lips. "He had this fake accent he'd used whenever we went out. But when he was angry, when he was screaming at me in the kitchen, the accent would disappear, and he'd sound just like a boy from South Georgia. It was all an act, detective. He's a pathological liar. He can't help himself. He has to be the center of attention." "We're investigating the murder of Sarah Prather," Clara said. "She went missing on October 12th. Did you see Johnny around that time?" Samantha's breath hitched. She looked toward the television, where her children were laughing, then back at Clara. Her eyes were wide with fear. "A few days after that, girl went missing," Samantha said, her voice trembling. "Johnny called me. He was very excited, very hyper. He asked me to meet him at the park near the creek. When I got there, he was sitting on his motorcycle. He looked at me and said, 'Samantha, if you had to get rid of a body, how would you do it?'" Clara leaned forward. "What did you say?" "I laughed," Samantha said, tears spilling over her lashes. "I thought he was joking. I thought it was just another one of his crazy stories to try and scare me. I said, 'I don't know. Johnny, I guess I'd put it out on Braddock Road. There's nothing out there but woods and swamps.' And then he looked at me. He had this horrible smile on his face. And he said, 'Braddock Road, that's where she is. But don't you worry about it. I've taken care of it.'" Clara felt a thrill of cold adrenaline. "He said that, specifically?" "Yes," Samantha sobbed. "He said, 'Braddock Road, that's where she is.' I didn't believe him. I thought he was just trying to sound dangerous. But then, 3 weeks later, I saw on the news that they found her body right there, off Braddock Road, exactly where I told him." "Why didn't you call the police?" Samantha, Clara asked gently. "I was terrified," Samantha said, burying her face in her hands. "He told me if I ever betrayed him, he'd kill my children. I know what he's capable of. He has this rage in him. It's like a monster. If he found out I talked to you, he'd come for us." Clara took Samantha's hand. "We are going to protect you, Samantha. But we need your help. We need to get him on tape confessing to what he did." "On tape?" Samantha looked up, her face white. "We want you to wear a wire," Clara said. "We'll set up a meeting. You'll ask him about that night. We'll be right there, watching you. We won't let anything happen to you." Samantha didn't answer for a long time. She looked at the photograph of her children on the mantelpiece, then at Clara. "She had a mother, didn't she?" Samantha asked. "That girl, Sarah?" "Yes," Clara said. She has a mother who's completely destroyed. Samantha wiped her tears and took a deep breath. All right, I'll do it. I'll do it for her. Chapter 8. The Wire. The operation was set for a humid Tuesday afternoon. The location was the garage of Johnson's mother's house, a small, cluttered property in a rural pocket of Duval County. Johnson was there, working on the engine of his blue Honda, which sat on a hydraulic stand in the center of the concrete floor. Clara and Dane sat in the back of a panel van parked 200 yards down the road. They were surrounded by electronic monitoring, digital recorders, and a real-time audio feed that was connected to a small, wireless transmitter hidden in the cups of Samantha's bra. Tess, Tess, Samantha's voice came through the headphones, high-pitched and breathless. Can you hear me? We hear you loud and clear, Samantha Clara said into her headset. You're doing great. Just remember, keep him calm. Ask him to look at the carburetor on your truck. Use that as an excuse to start the conversation. Clara watched through a small peephole in the van's side door as Samantha's pickup truck pulled into the driveway of the Johnson home. Samantha got out, her movements stiff and unnatural. She walked toward the open garage door where the shadow of John Wayne Johnson was visible against the white light of the interior. Johnny, Samantha's voice came through the speaker. Samantha, Johnson's deep voice boomed, the fake lilt clearly audible. What brings you to my hall? My truck's running rough again, she said. I thought maybe you could look at the distributor. Of course, Johnson said. A warrior must care for his lady's chariot. Let me finish with the steed. There was a sound of metal tools clattering against concrete, then the squeak of his heavy boots as he walked toward her. You look nervous, Samantha Johnson said. His voice was suddenly lower, more intimate. Your heart is beating fast. I can see it in your throat. In the van, Clara gripped her coffee cup, her knuckles white. Keep it natural, Samantha, she whispered. I'm worried, Johnny, Samantha said. The police came to my house. They were asking about that girl, Sarah. There was a long silence on the tape. The only sound was the distant hum of a lawnmower and the heavy, rhythmic breathing of John Wayne Johnson. The police, Johnson said. His voice had lost its playful, Viking lilt. It was flat, hard, and thoroughly southern. What did they ask you? They asked if I knew where you were on the night she disappeared, Samantha said, her voice shaking slightly but holding. They said they have video of her on your bike. Johnny, you didn't do anything to her, did you? You tell them nothing, Johnson said. His voice was a harsh whisper now. You know nothing, you drop it. But Johnny, they found her on Braddock Road. Samantha pressed, her voice rising in simulated panic. That's where we talked about what really happened that night. I said, we are not talking about that, Johnson snapped. The sound of his fist hitting the metal hood of the truck came through the speaker like a gunshot. You keep your mouth shut, Samantha. You hear me? Those cops, they don't have nothing. They're just fishing. If you start running your mouth, you're going to make things very bad for yourself. Johnny, please. Go home, Samantha Johnson said, his voice cold and final. Go home and take care of your kids. And don't you ever bring that name up to me again. The sound of Samantha's quick retreating footsteps filled the headphones, followed by the slam of her truck door and the roar of the engine as she backed out of the driveway. Clara pulled off her headset and let out a long breath. He didn't confess, Dane said, sighing. He shut her down. But he didn't deny it either, Clara said, her eyes bright. And did you hear his voice? The accent was completely gone. He was terrified of what she might say. He's starting to feel the pressure, Marcus. He's starting to realize we're not going away. They met Samantha at a designated safe site, a grocery store parking lot a mile away. Samantha was shaking so violently she could barely turn off her ignition. Clara got into the passenger seat and took the wire from her, wrapping her in a warm blanket from the back seat. I'm sorry, Samantha sobbed. I didn't get him to say it on tape. I let you down. You did not let us down, Samantha, Clara said, her voice full of genuine warmth. You were incredibly brave. You showed us that he's scared. You showed us that his Viking shield has a crack in it. We can use this. Chapter 8. The Second Alibi. The investigation dragged into its second year. The department's budget was tight, and the media's attention had shifted to other, more recent tragedies. But Clara refused to let the file on Sarah Prather grow cold. She spent her nights review the interview transcripts, searching for the one piece of evidence that would bridge the gap between suspicion and arrest. We need the current girlfriend, Clara said to Dane during a late-night session in the office. Chelsea Burton. She's the one who gave him the alibi for the night of the murder. She's terrified of him, Clara, Dane said. When we talked to her last year, she was shaking like a leaf. She swore he was home by 2 in the morning and went straight to bed. But they're not together anymore, Clara said, pulling up a fresh report from the patrol division. 3 months ago, Chelsea called patrol to report a domestic disturbance. She didn't press charges, she was too scared back. The report says they've officially split up. She's living with her sister in a secure apartment building in South Side. Let's go, Dane said, grabbing his jacket. Time changes things. When the fear of the man is no longer in the house, the truth has a way of coming out. They found Chelsea Burton at a small hair salon where she worked as a stylist. She was 26, a fragile-looking woman with dyed black hair and a nervous, watchful gaze. When Clara and Dane walked in, she dropped her scissors, her face turning gray. I can't talk here, she whispered, looking around at her clients. We can talk in our car. Chelsea, Clara said gently, just 5 minutes. In the back seat of the unmarked sedan, Chelsea sat with her knees pulled up to her chest. She looked out the window, her breath coming in quick, shallow gasps. He's going to kill me, she said. If he finds out I talked to you, he'll kill me and my son. He's not going to kill you, Chelsea, Clara said, turning around in her seat to face her. We have him under but we need to know the truth about October 12th. Your statement is the only thing keeping him out of jail. Chelsea let out a dry, choking sob. It was a lie. He made me say it. Tell us what happened, Dane said. That night, he didn't come home at 2, Chelsea said, her voice trembling. He didn't come home at all that night. I didn't see him until 2 days later. He walked into our trailer, and he was covered in dirt and sand. He looked like a wild animal. He had this gun in his hand, a little black revolver. Clara leaned in close. A revolver. Yes, Chelsea nodded, her tears flowing freely now. He made me get in my car with him. He drove me out to Braddock Road. He was hysterical. He kept saying, I lost the shells. I have to find the casings. We walked along the shoulder of the road in the dark with flashlights, looking for bullet casings. But it was a revolver. So there weren't any casings on the ground. I didn't know that then. I was just so scared. Did he tell you what he did? Yes, Chelsea whispered. He said he took that girl from the bar down to Braddock Road. He said she was disrespectful to him. She didn't respect his power. He got mad, shot her in the back, and dragged her body into the woods. He told me if I ever told anyone, he'd kill my son in front of me. He held the gun to my head. Detective, he made me swear on my son's life. What did he do with the gun? Clara asked. He threw it, Chelsea said. We were driving back over the Trout River Bridge. He rolled down the window and threw the gun and his leather vest into the water. He said, now the evidence is with the fishes. He laughed. He thought it was funny. Clara looked at Dane. The piece of the puzzle they had been missing for 2 years had just fallen into place. Chelsea, Clara said, her voice steady and full of resolve. Will you write this down? Will you sign a sworn statement? Chelsea looked at Clara, her eyes clear of fear for the first time. Yes, I'll sign it. I want him gone. I want to sleep at night. Chapter 9: The Box. The arrest of John Wayne Johnson was planned with the precision of a military assault. Because of his size, his history of violence, and his access to weapons, the department's SWAT team was utilized to execute the warrant. They took him at 5 in the morning, as he stepped out of his trailer to go to his truck. He was brought down in the wet grass of his yard, handcuffed, and transported directly to the Sheriff's Bureau headquarters in downtown Jacksonville. Clara sat in the observation room behind the two-way mirror, watching the interrogation room. The box. The box was a small, windowless space with cream-colored cinder block walls, a heavy steel table bolted to the floor, and 3 metal chairs. In the center of the table sat a plastic trash can. Johnson had been left alone in the room for 45 minutes, without his motorcycle, his leather vest, and his fake accent. He looked smaller. He was wearing a dirty gray t-shirt and jeans, his bald head gleaming under the fluorescent lights. His hands were cuffed to a ring in the center of the table. He was coming apart. Through the glass, Clara could see his chest rising and falling in rapid, shallow movements. He was dry heaving into the plastic trash can, his massive frame shaking with a violent somatic panic. His skin was pale, almost translucent, and a thick sweat covered his bald head. He's sick, Dane said, standing beside Clara. He's not sick, Clara said, her voice cold. He's terrified. His mind is his worst enemy right now. He's spent years building this fantasy of the Viking warrior, and now he's realizing that he's just a man in a small room, and the door is locked. Clara opened the door and stepped into the box. She carried a thick manila folder containing the forensic reports, the photographs of Sarah's remains, and Chelsea Burton's signed statement. She sat down opposite him. She did not speak for a long moment. She simply opened the folder and began to slowly lay out the photographs of the woods off Black Creek Road, the bone fragments, and the faded blue canvas shoes. Johnson looked at the photographs, then looked away, his jaw working. "I am sick," he said. His voice was thin, and the Icelandic accent was entirely gone. It was the flat, nasal drawl of South Georgia. "I think I have cancer. The doctors, they told me I need more blood work. I need to go to the hospital." "You don't have cancer," Johnny Clara said, her voice quiet, almost maternal. "You have a conscience. It's a very different kind of sickness." "I didn't do this," Johnson whispered, his eyes fixed on the corner of the table. "I dropped her off at the party. I told you. We talked to the owners of that house. Johnny,